So this is the first time I've put together content like this. If this video ends up being something you enjoy, make sure you subscribe and leave me a comment down below on this video, and that way I can know I can try and put some more videos like this together, doing some comparisons and whatnot, so that as new products are released, we all as a community can generally get a good idea of what's worth it and what's not. So if you do find this to be something that is useful and helpful, I really appreciate it. If you'd, just drop me a comment or something. All right, on to the actual meat of this video. So most of the systems that I build for my clients are right at or under $1,000. So I am constantly looking for GPUs that are $350 or less, which led me to a question. If I have a budget of $350, what is the best video card I can get for that money? Is it Nvidia's brand new offering? Is it Intel, or is it like a used card from AMD? So what I did is I went out and I bought 5 separate video cards, all for under $350. And my goal was originally with this video to determine if the 5060 was a ripoff or a scam. And it very quickly turned into overall what is the best video card for under that price. So as we go through this, I'm going to post up some charts just so we can visually see and even by the numbers determine if the 5060 is the best value for money or if it's one of these other cards. And once we have all that information, we'll be able to make a determination of, hey, this is your best video card to buy right now in 2025. The 5 video cards I bought a RTX 3060, an RTX 4060 Ti, a Intel B580, the AMD RX 6750 XT, and the RTX 5060. These are the 3 things that I wanted to answer with this. 1, can you actually tell these cards apart without having an FPS counter up on the screen? When you're actually playing, can you tell the difference between these cards at 1080p? Just straight up, I want to answer that question. 2, which one offers the best performance value based on the available money that I had to spend? So out of the $350, was there a single card that had literally the highest score that would be like, hey, by far and away, this is the card you should definitely buy for the money? And 3, if you're doing a little bit of everything, video games, AI, spreadsheets, just browsing the internet, watching YouTube, what is the best overall choice of video card? So let's talk about price. Each card that I purchased was purchased for under $350. The 3060 12 gig that we got was purchased for $280. The 4060 Ti was purchased for $330. The B580 was purchased for $325. The RX 6750 was purchased for $330. And the RTX 5060 was selling for literally at every retailer when I bought this, $340. Now, literally everywhere you look for this card is selling under $300. What they originally sold it for and what everyone was expecting this card to sell for was like the highest out of all of them. And I, again, paid $340 for that. So all the testing with these cards was done on the same computer, which has an i7 11700K, 32 gigs of DDR4, running at 2133, and a 1 terabyte NVMe drive. Windows 11, latest updates. I removed all of the Windows software that didn't need to be on the computer. I made sure that I disabled Windows updates before I started testing so that there would be the exact same experience for all the games that we tested with across the board from start to finish without having something like a Windows update skew the results heavily. So let's start going through the cards. We're gonna start with the 3060 12 gig. Honestly, I wasn't expecting a huge number on any of these tests with this card. I expected it to be exactly what it is, a cheap, older card that at the end of the day, 1080p gaming, it'll just knock it out of the park and let's keep going. And it definitely does that. So in 3D Mark Steel Nomad, we have an average score of 1995, hanging out dead last. This card is not designed to work well with that synthetic benchmark. It's designed more for the other benchmark which we did, which was Time Spy. The average score in Time Spy was 13,729 with an average FPS of 93, which compared to the rest of these cards, not bad for an almost 5-year-old GPU. Now onto in-engine benchmarks. We used Cyberpunk, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Black Myth Wukong, and Red Dead Redemption 2. So in Cyberpunk 2077, we had ray tracing off. We got an average FPS of 82, which is a lot closer to the newer, more powerful cards than I expected it to be. It was surprising, but what wasn't surprising, as soon as you turn frame gen on, as well as ray tracing, the FPS drops all the way down to 52, which is, I mean, the 30 series was the first time these features were really offered, and frame gen wasn't even offered on the card. It was retroactively added in some games. So seeing these scores be that low, again, almost 5-year-old card, not super shocking. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider, we got 4th, which is not last. We got an FPS average of 161, which I guess makes sense, seeing as this game was designed around this generation of card. And in Black Myth Wukong with ray tracing off and no frame gen, we are shockingly, again, not sitting in dead last, with an average of 79 FPS and lows of 61 FPS. But as soon as you turn frame gen and ray tracing on, we shoot up to 100 FPS with lows of 85. I think that when Black Myth Wukong was designed, they didn't expect people to be playing the game on that card. And the lack of those additional technologies shows up in this score, which is in first place somehow. So I'm just thinking that because the card doesn't actively have it enabled, that it's just using the raw horsepower of the card and just rendering without any of those technologies actually turned on, even though we went and turned them on. Finally, in Red Dead Redemption 2, we are sitting at 72 FPS with lows at 48 FPS, which is dead last. But the FPS lows are second, which is surprising, seeing as sometimes we see other cards dipping lower than that, even though they're newer, more powerful cards with more technology that should prevent the frame drops from getting that low. So the next thing we're going to talk about with all these cards is AI image generation. I used Stability Matrix and ran a series of 10 batches of 6 images using the same prompt across the board for all of the cards. So we get the exact same idea of a response from everyone, and none of them were more complex than the other. So this card came third out of all the cards that we did testing with, and we'll get into a little bit of an explanation why when we get to some of these other cards, why some of the cards that might have had more memory performed worse even though they were newer. So with this test specifically, lower is better on time and higher is better on iterations per second. So this card took a total time of 269 seconds to render those 60 images. So the average time to render on this card was 269 seconds and 1.42 iterations per second, meaning that it's a pretty solid card for just cheap AI stuff. For real world testing, I played Dune Awakening on recommended settings for 3 hours, just to see what the experience was like. Again, it was all done at 1080p on this same computer. Overall, the experience was good. Very little render lag or buffering or anything like that. No weird visual artifacts. FPS stayed pretty locked in, like an 85 to 125 FPS window, depending on where I was and what was going on in the game. And honestly, if you told me that I was playing on such an old card, I probably wouldn't have believed you, seeing as the game came out a month ago. It stayed extremely stable, and honestly, it was a very, very playable experience. So if you're in a situation where you have an older card like this, and you're actively out there wondering what the experience is like on some of the newer cards, you're not really missing out on much. So the final number that I wanted to wrap into this was the performance value, which works out to be about 61%. So there are definitely cards that if you have that full $350 to spend, they're definitely better cards. Overall, if you have a budget of under $300 for a video card, it really is hard not to recommend this or the 3060 Ti. They are great cards. They have a lot of inbuilt, already developed driver and video game support out there. They work very well with AI image generation. And if your overall build is going to be under 800 bucks, like, there really is not another choice that I can honestly make for this. So overall, this card comes in 5th place based on all of the scores and just overall costs and everything, which, I mean, it's not really a big surprise. We're talking about the oldest card, the least expensive card. And like I said, if your budget is under 800 bucks, it's a good way to go. So next, I tested the Intel Arc B580 12 gigabyte, which we picked up for 325 bucks. And boy, was the immaturity of this card apparent. It performs solidly across almost all of the synthetic tests, but when you actually start playing newly released games, some of the shortcomings of this card become apparent, which it's one of those things where, you know, the longer that this card is available and out in the public, you're gonna get better and better driver support just across the board, and performance overall will improve. Perfect example is when we get into some of the actual real world testing that I did. The day after I got done testing, there was a driver release specifically for this card that increased overall in-game performance by about 10%. So let's start with our synthetic benchmarking. In Steel Nomad, we got an average score of 3057, which is second on our list. In Time Spy, the average score was 21225 with an average FPS of 142, which is up in first on this list. That is again an indication of the fact that this card has more memory and is more modern than some of these other cards. In actual in-game benchmarking, Cyberpunk 2077 with RT off, we got an average FPS of 105, which is good for second place. But as soon as you turn frame gen and RT off, this card falls all the way down to 70 FPS, which is second to last. XESS is good. But in a game that is designed around NVIDIA's upscaling and frame gen model, you can really see where this game just kind of struggles. So in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, the B580 shines once again. It's an older title that uses video memory to handle just about everything. So more memory is more gooder. And we see 192 FPS for second place finish. In Black Myth Wukong with RT off and no frame gen, the B580 comes in dead last. I was expecting the B580 to have issue with some of the more modern titles, but Intel has had time to work on this and release drivers. This game's been out for a little bit now, so I was hoping to see better numbers across the board. So we see an average of 58 FPS with lows down at 52. Then once we turn frame gen and RT on, there is no massive bump in performance, which keeps the card in dead last with an average of 62 FPS with lows of 54 FPS. The window between those two FPS is kind of narrow though, which is somewhat nice. You're still gonna average across the board under 60 FPS, but you're not gonna see super, super low dips that are gonna be jarring and taking you out of the experience of what you're doing. In Red Dead Redemption 2, we are seeing the Jekyll and Hyde that is this card. With everything else that this card has to offer, I am really, really seeing the potential and also the drawbacks of this card. So the average FPS is 120, which is outstanding. It's the highest FPS total we scored with all of the cards, but the lows in this we're at 31, which if you're actively playing this game and you're averaging, let's say a smooth 60 FPS, and suddenly your frame rate is dropped in half, you're going to feel that, and it's going to be like, oh, what just happened? Again, this comes down to a maturity issue. I feel like the longer this card exists, the more you're gonna see less and less titles have that problem. So let's talk about the AI stuff. This card potentially will be great once the support gets there. But right now, it is not compatible with Stability Matrix, and you have to install a specific tool from Intel plus a bunch of plugins just to get it to work. And sure, it can do it, but with the amount of video memory that this has, at some point, once this card becomes like more of a mainstream thing, availability becomes higher and the prices start to settle on them, and we start to see companies do crazy things because Intel's letting people do whatever they want with this card, like putting 2 GPUs on a single card, you're gonna see support for this card come way up in the AI space, and you're gonna see this card be possibly one of the best non-90 series cards for doing AI stuff. Because when you can toss 2 GPUs and a bunch of memory at a process in a single PCI slot, companies are gonna go wild for that. So unfortunately, because of that, this card scored a DNF in the AI stuff. So moving on to Dune Awakening. This was my experience actively playing on this card for the first time. I had one of the A770 cards that I ended up selling to a customer after putting it in a build and doing some benchmarking with it, but I never got a real large amount of time to sit and play with the card on the card in an actual game. Which leads me to saying, when a game first comes out, you're really gonna have a kind of a mixed bag experience with this card. There are moments where you can clearly see how much better this card can be. The overall visual fidelity is better. The frame rates are much higher, but then out of nowhere, you'll be slapped in the face where the game gets super choppy and borderline unplayable for moments. And then you'll get these weird visual lighting artifacts that just pop up that have existed since the A770. Like, I believe Halo was the first game, Halo Infinite was the first game where those artifacts really started showing just up everywhere. But at the same time, I want to say that it is an immaturity thing with this card and how they handle lighting, but they should have had enough time by now to gotten that figured out. Maybe it's just an underlying issue that they have to work with developers on to get sorted. But overall, this card, like I would say, out of all of the cards in Dune Awakening, performed the worst. That being said, they released a driver update the next day that brought FPS and just overall stability up significantly. And if you go online, you can find a lot of details about that. People are just raving about the card now. So your experience definitely will vary. And when a game comes out and that technology pipeline starts flowing better with Intel, you're gonna see less and less problems. And you're gonna enjoy having this card more and more in your rig. The price to performance value for this card was 92%, which out of all the cards we tested was second. It has the most RAM, some of the highest benchmark scores, and is priced under the 5060. So it's really hard not to recommend this card as like the one to buy on this list out of all of the cards that we tested. But right now, people always talk about the insecurity of future versions of this card, or the C series of this card. I'm not worried about that so much. What I am worried about is Intel's shrinking worker base and Intel shrinking the amount of people that are readily available to work on driver updates for this card. So I can't, in good conscience, put this as the first place card. Second place though, no problem with that. If you can get the B580 for MSRP, it's a solid card. There's a lot of catch up that Intel still does need to play, but you can just see the potential. My hope is that in a few years we have Team Red, Team Green, and Team Blue all competing for the same space roughly at the same price points, which is the Intel price points, not the Nvidia price points. But I also want $1 billion to start fixing all the problems in the world, and that's just not going to happen. So for now on this list, this card gets put in third place. The highs really do balance out the lows, and it really, really keeps this card in the middle of the pack with potential in the future for it to be a much higher rated card. So next, let's talk about 4060 Ti. In my mind, going into all of this testing, this is going to be the card that, at the end of the day, I'm going to recommend this card. It is not the newest. It is less cheap than the new version of the card with the same performance and the same features. So that being said, I am expecting this card to perform at the absolute top of the list, across the table on all of my tests, real world and synthetic. So in Steel Nomad, we have an average score of 2977, which is good for second place. And in Time Spy, the average score is 21221, with an average FPS of 142, which is second only behind the B580, which again, memory thing. I was really expecting in these synthetic benchmarks, both of them to be at the top of the list, but they're not. So I'm thinking the fact that this is just an 8 gig card is what's holding those scores back, not the fact that it's, you know, a TI variant. In Cyberpunk 2077 with ray tracing off, we're at 96 FPS, which is all the way down in fourth. But as soon as you turn frame gen and ray tracing on, this card shoots up to first, which is what I was expecting. Which again shows that while the base performance of the card being only an 8 gig card is hampered by that, once you turn the technologies on that Nvidia has developed, the card performs much better. So in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, the 4060 Ti is all the way out in first with 196 FPS, which is contradictory to more memory equals more gooder in this specific situation, which again, I think comes down to the developer working closely with Nvidia to optimize for these cards. In Black Myth Wukong with ray tracing off and no frame gen, second place, we're seeing 102 FPS average with lows of 67. Once you turn everything back on and set everything to the recommended settings, we drop all the way down to 67 FPS and 52 FPS lows. I am perplexed by the performance of this card, given that this card and this game were developed basically side by side, because Black Myth Wukong was supposed to be this showcase of what Nvidia cards can do, and they're not doing so hot. In Red Dead Redemption 2, the 4060 Ti is in third place now with an average of 100 FPS and lows of 45, which again is not making much sense. All of these cards are tested with, again, same settings, same computer in every single game. Only thing that's different is the manufacturer of the card or the variant of the card. Now, this is where I think this card really, really shines, which is in AI workloads. When you compare this to not only some of the more modern cards, but cards that are potentially in a price tier above this, the 4060 Ti is kind of crushing it. Literally all of the other cards are behind this card, whether they have more memory or not. So our 10 batches of 6 images took an average of 174 seconds with 2.264 iterations per second, which is crazy. My 3090 is averaging 2.75 iterations per second. Granted, my speeds are much, much lower, averaging around 80 seconds, but the iterations per second that this GPU can put out is pretty good, which means that if you can get this same variant of the card with more memory, you're gonna have a pretty good time with this card in the AI workloads. For under $350 though, 100% this is the card to buy. If your budget is $350, you have that $350 for AI stuff, buy this card. There's no other card on this list I can recommend for that. But if you can find a 4070 or a 4070 Ti or a 4070 Ti Super, obviously, if you can find them at that price, buy that. That would be technology, memory, it all comes together. With the higher up you get with these cards, you just end up with a better experience overall. In Dune Awakening, if you actually asked me, like, life or death situation. What video card are you playing on? Which Nvidia card are you playing on? Is it the 3060, the 4060 Ti, or the 5060? I honestly couldn't tell you. Sure, the FPS counter that was in the corner of the screen told me that I was getting more FPS, but no hiccups, no weird artifacting, no stutters. It's almost as if this game was designed around this card, quite possibly, not the 50 series card. Just a smooth experience through and through. Price to performance for this card, 93%, which is, out of all the cards, is the highest on this list. Sure, it has less RAM than the B580, it costs $5 more, but overall, if you're looking for a card that just works and doesn't get in your way with literally anything you're doing, this is it. This is the card you buy. Is what I would have said if this card actually didn't come in second place. Who knew that you can basically end up in a situation where you're the most recent generation of card other than what is current, but literally you're so up and down across the board with all the tests that it just doesn't make sense. And like there's a stability issue somewhere that you can't really put your finger on, and it's not the rest of the system. So now we have the antagonist of this video, the whole reason I started making this video in the first place, which was the 5060. And right out of the gate, I bought this card as soon as it was available, and I wanted to test. There was so much negative press about this, for good reason. And I just wanted to figure out, honestly, hey, is this a scam? Is this a ripoff? What is this? Now, this card is widely available for $299 at just about every retailer. And if you really look, you can find them for even cheaper than that, which kind of puts into perspective where this card should be sold at, like as a MSRP versus what it actually was released at. So I guess the other thing I want to answer with this is this card really as bad as everyone on the internet is screaming that it is? So I guess let's get into some results here and see. In Steel Nomad, we have an average score of 3151, which is the highest score yet, showing modern tech equals higher scores generally. In Time Spy, we get an average of 2854 with an average of 139 FPS. Okay, that's fourth. That doesn't make sense based on the whole modern tech equals higher scores statement that I just made. But I'm sure, this is going to perform much better in the rest of these. Anyways, in Cyberpunk 2077 RT off, we are at 107 FPS, which is all the way out in front. But as soon as you turn frame gen and ray tracing on, this card is only ahead of the B580 and the 3060 with an average FPS of 102, which is third place. When you have these technologies that this card is sold on turned off, it performs better than when they're on. I don't know, that's just weird in that hey, this technology is supposed to make these things faster and more smooth. Guess not. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider, the 5060 is dead last. Like actually dead last. Literally 20 FPS behind all the rest of the cards. It's the same settings. Nothing is like different between the computer, but like it's dead last. In Black Myth Wukong with RT off and no frame gen, we're all the way back out in first with an average of 105 and lows at 66. When you turn frame gen and RT on, we are sitting at 84 and 54, which is your average and lows, which again, we're back in third place, which I would expect this card to be performing better. Should be better. In Red Dead Redemption 2, I was hoping again for numbers that kind of made sense, but with an average FPS of 96, which is somewhat high, and lows down at 44, this card came in fourth. This again is one of those situations like the B580 where playing and actually going from that high number down to that low number is going to be actually jarring. You're going to have stuttering and you're going to be like, what is going on? Something was wrong with my computer. And that's never the experience you want to have when you're trying to play a game, right? Then we get on to our AI image generation. The thing this card was actually designed built around and sold for Blackwell. That's it. This is the end all be all when it comes to AI stuff. It came in second. You know, it's behind the last generation card that's basically the same card with a different GPU. The average time was 207 seconds, and the average iterations per second was 185. The average iterations was 1.875. It's like, how does the old card that's supposed to be worse at AI stuff than this perform better? Like, it shouldn't. That's where it's at. In Dune Awakening, there was literally, again, there was no difference between this and the other cards. The 30 series, the 40 series, and 50 series, they perform exactly the same. If you told me I was playing on the 3060, I'd have believed you. It's just, it feels exactly the same, which I guess is the point of the 30 series card. No matter which generation you have, since ray tracing and the RTX like architecture has existed, they just want you to have a similar experience across all of them. Like, realistically, between all of these thus far, I don't think, if I really put it to you, I don't think anyone would be able to tell me the difference between the cards, except for the B580 just getting going. Because I do believe the B580, like I said, I don't think the drivers have been certified for this game yet. But I think any game that's been out more than a month will run fine on that card. On all of these cards, really. Like, I'll say this, like, without, like, actually any bias or, like, malintent. If you can get a 3060 Ti, there is no reason to upgrade it to a 4060 Ti or a 5060. Literally zero reason. Because this 3060, which is a base model, just regular old 3060, performed just as well as both of the other cards. Like a 3080 is better than any of these cards that we've tested today. Even the one I'm testing right now. Like, there's zero reason. Like, legitimately, I don't see any reason to buy any of these cards. If you have the option to buy the 3060 Ti, get that. If you can get the 4060 Ti within $20 of the 3060 Ti, buy that. The 5060 is like there's no reason to buy this card unless it drops like another $50. The B580 is the most compelling value, is because Intel is still putting money into the ecosystem and saying, hey, yes, we released this card, but we're going to continue to release updates and upgrades for it as far as drivers and performance stuff is concerned. Nvidia's like, hey, you bought your 5060, good luck. And the 6750 XT that we started off with, again, if I put a gun to someone's head, they'd have no clue. They wouldn't be able to tell me, hey, this is this card, this was this card, just based on the performance. They are so close with one another. Even my benchmark stuff showed that. Like, it's just wild how close these cards are together in performance. Like, not just in synthetic benchmarks, but in actual use case. But even the AI, if you look at the charts that I posted, like, the AI difference in iterations per second and how long it takes to actually render what I asked it to render, there's less than 2 seconds difference. When you get to economy of scale, sure, if you're rendering 100,000 images, you'll save 20 minutes, right? Like, great. But in day-to-day use, the people who are buying these cards aren't going to be doing that. So if you can get a 3060 Ti, buy a 3060 Ti. If you can get the 69 or the 6750 XT, buy that. If you can get a B580, buy that. There's a little bit of work you have to do for the AI, but I can't justify a 5060. I was hoping to come to like a different conclusion after playing all of these, but like I can't justify it because the performance difference is so small. Like in actual use, not just in, like I said, the synthetic benchmarks. And it's crazy. Like, I've spent, we're up to 15 hours testing these cards. Like, just straight, actively playing a single game, looking for performance differences. We had one hiccup with a card that is still in its infancy, but the rest of them, like I said, you can't tell the difference. You literally can't. Look, if you want to legitimately do 720p at 60 hertz, but like for the price point these things are at, the 5060 is overpriced. It legitimately is. If the card was $50 less, it'd be a good value. If you can get a 4060 Ti for the same cost as a 5060, 100% buy the 4060 Ti. If you can get a 3060 Ti for the same cost, 100% buy. If you can get any of the cards today that I've tested for lower than the MSRP of a 5060, buy it. It is suspiciously quiet in my living room right now. The price to performance on this card was 91%. It was, at time of purchase, the most expensive and came average third place across the board. There are things that this card is advertised to do better that it just doesn't, and it should. Sure, that may be a driver thing. Nvidia's have a lot of problems with their drivers over the past 6 months. It might be a Windows thing. The build that I'm on in Windows might just be problematic for this card and these drivers. But if you're an average person in this situation with that same setup, on that same build, your life is gonna suck and you're gonna wonder why you spent the money on this, especially if you're upgrading from like a 30 card. Like let's say you're upgrading from a 3060 to this. You're not gonna be able to tell the difference. What actually is there to justify that upgrade that you just made? So I highly recommend, before just blindly buying this card, just because it is the newest thing from Nvidia in your price bracket, you consider buying the 4060 Ti, or you consider buying the last card of this comparison, the RX 6750 XT. The RX 6750 XT was added pretty late into this process because I had trouble finding this card. And the reason I had trouble finding this card is because apparently, if you know what the capabilities of that card is, and you know how much it sold for when new, if you're seeing it for under that price, you're just gonna buy it and put it in something. So it's a 12 gig card available for under $350. It's gonna be hard to come by, just straight up. So this card wasn't even in the radar for actually competing well in this showdown at all for me. And as we go through this, you're gonna hear the numbers and you're gonna get some takeaways from this based on some of the things I say. And there's one point that stood out to me about this whole thing, and we'll kind of run through that when we get towards the end. So in Steel Nomad, we had an average score of 2349, and in TimeSpy, an average score of 21219, with an average FPS of 141, which is better than the 5060, which is newer and costs more than what I paid for this card. In Cyberpunk 2077, with ray tracing off, we are seeing 96 FPS, which puts this card in third, and with ray tracing and frame gen on, we're getting 140 FPS, which is surprisingly in second place. I was expecting the scores for this to be lower, so the fact that it does kind of pop up in second place just illustrates how much work AMD has put into getting their cards performant and optimized to work with games that people are actually out there playing. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider, the 6750 XT comes in third again with an average of 182 FPS. In Black Myth Wukong with RT off and no frame gen, we're getting an average of 89 FPS and lows at 70 FPS. With ray tracing and frame gen on, we're sitting at 96 and lows of 82, which is second place again. In Red Dead Redemption, this trend continues with a score of 118 average with lows of 52, which the lows, I want to say, are going to be jarring if you're coming all the way down from 118. But if you're playing at 1080p 60, then you're barely going to see any movement there. So the lows aren't going to feel as painful. It's when you start getting below the 40, below 30, that's when you really, really feel it. Now, this is where this card kind of falls short for the context of this video. And I ran into issue after issue after issue trying to get stability matrix running correctly on this card, even though it is compatible. The crux of the issue is that it's compatible in Linux, it's not compatible in Windows. All of the rest of the tests that I ran were done in Windows for all the other cards, so I wasn't gonna make an exception for this card. So while once I did get it into Linux and I started running Stability Matrix in Linux, it was doing exactly as well as you expected, on par with the 4060 Ti, and definitely outpunching the 5060. For the context of this test, I had to give this card a DNF, just because I couldn't generate results in Windows to put on my charts. So moving on to Dune Awakening. This is where my mind was really changed about this card. It put out some of the highest consistent FPS and had the most detail when actively playing through the game. From area to area, when things were loading in, it stayed the sharpest. And I never really saw anything that stood out to me as, so is that blurry? Is that not sharp enough? It never really crossed my mind. It never was an issue where I was having random pop-ins like I was having with some of the other cards, specifically the B580. So I don't honestly know why I was expecting a card that retailed for $550 to perform poorly in this game. But my general perception was that it would. And in all honesty, it was the smoothest experience I had playing Dune Awakening on this build out of all of the cards. The price to performance value for this card is at 90%, which is middle of the road by all accounts. But in every single test, it stayed middle of the road. The highs weren't super high, but the lows weren't super low. Meaning that the average experience I had across the board with this card was the smoothest. It was the most stable from start to finish. And I think that's what you're looking for with a video card. When you're actively using it and you're actively playing, you don't want to have these giant jumps up to super high numbers and then come crashing back down when you end up in a situation where the game is trying to render something that is out of what its capabilities are. It's got 12 gigs of memory. It is, again, at time of purchase, it was cheaper than the 5060. And it's the only real option that jumps out as far as stability, memory, and overall capabilities. So I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is, and I'm gonna put this in a computer in my house, and I'm gonna use it, and I'm not gonna have any regrets. Because it's stable, it's solid, and like overall, like, I enjoyed using this card. And it's the one I'd recommend. And it's the one that came in first, based off of the highs and lows and price to performance and everything. So let's wrap this up. After spending a week doing testing and spending 15 straight hours playing on these cards, honestly, I can't say that the 5060 is a bad card. It's not a video card that's gonna stop you from playing video games or prevent you from playing titles at 1080p. What I can say is that when they first announced this card, the price that it was being advertised at didn't make sense at all. There are better cards that offer the same performance for less money. Now that the prices come down on the card, and if this card gets down to, say, $270, sure, it's a card that I end up recommending, because that would put it cheaper than all of the other cards that I bought, and less expensive than even the 3060 that we're running here. So at that point, you're getting better technology and you're getting a newer card. You're gonna end up having a better experience playing at that point. My whole thing with this is Nvidia had the opportunity to offer the gaming community a bone with this card. A video card that 80% of people are gonna end up using, and they will use for years. until they really start upgrading their hardware, or it's not something that's coming in a pre-build. They had the opportunity to pour a little bit of water on the fire that they created with their pricing for the 50 series cards, and they didn't. So that being said, is the 5060 a ripoff? No. Is it a good value? No. Should you buy something else for the money? Yeah, for sure. All I can say is when you're looking for a video card, don't settle. Keep looking. You can find some crazy deals out there on Facebook Marketplace, eBay, Craigslist. People are selling computers that aren't working all the time, that have great components, that everything else in the computer might be dead, but the video card is working fine, and you can just take that video card out, slot it into your computer, and then sell the rest of the working components. That is definitely a thing. The thing that I hope we don't see, and it's a worrying trend because video card manufacturers are beholden to their shareholders, is a day where this hobby that we all love and enjoy, which is gaming on PCs, building PCs, becomes like truly a rich man's game, where the entry-level cost for a computer, no matter what you're putting into it, is $1,500 or more. Because that's a world where we are given fewer and fewer options, and we end up just getting what people are saying is what we need versus what we want. And the idea of that really, really sucks. So hopefully, with the next generation of these cards across the board from Intel, AMD, and Nvidia, we see a little bit of a more aligning with the reality of what people can afford. Like, I'm not talking about the 90 series cards. Those are always going to be expensive. They're always going to be hard to compete with for all manufacturers, and their cost very quickly gets justified by their capability. What I'm talking about is your 70 series cards coming down in price, your 60 series cards coming down in price, and, you know, maybe making the 50 series cards what it should be, which is just a low power, plug it in, doesn't need external power kind of idea for people who buy these bare bones computers from HP, Dell, Lenovo, and they don't have a video card, but they want to put one in. That's what the 50 card should be, nothing else. That all being said, buy used. Find the best thing you can for under your budget, and don't be afraid to sometimes take a chance by doing bids and not getting something right now at this moment. There's always going to be stuff out there for you to buy. And worst case scenario, you're buying whatever the latest card is for your budget. And based off all of our testing, you're not going to be disappointed. You just might be overpaying. So I'd love to get your thoughts on this style of video. For me, this is the first time I've ever done something like this. If you could leave comments below, let me know if I did a terrible job, if I did an okay job. If you'd want to see more stuff like this, you can drop them below, like I said, in the comments. You can hop on our Discord. You can come to my stream. I stream daily from 9 a.m. Eastern Standard to about 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard every single day on Twitch and on YouTube. I run a business, Bradenton PC Repair. You can just click wherever I put the button to get some more information on that. And the whole reason that my channel exists is to answer questions. Doesn't matter what part of a computer you have questions about, what your level of knowledge is when it comes to either computer repairs, computer building, gaming setups. My goal is to be a place where you can come, where my community is going to have someone that's going to be able to answer your question. We have people that are super knowledgeable about vintage stuff, about server stuff, about AMD, about Intel, about Nvidia. They all have different pieces of knowledge, which makes my community so great. And we're always looking for more people to join that community, to help grow it, and to help make the space that is my community the best it can possibly be, and help it become, you know, a place that people can go to and trust that they're going to get a legitimate and right answer. So if that's something you're interested in, swing by, check it out. Otherwise, thank you for watching, Everyone have a great day.
Hey, thanks for watching that video. If you liked that video, make sure you hit the like button. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure you hit the subscribe button. And I stream daily on Twitch at twitch.tv/SpecVengeance. And yeah, if you want to learn more about my services, check out Bradenton PC Repair.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.